Hello, everyone. My name is Zablon Owiti. I work with the South-South North as a research fellow in the Future Climate for Africa program. I will be moderating today's webinar on understanding capacity needs of African national meteorological and hydrological services. I wish to warmly welcome the panelists and the attendees to this webinar. As a background, this webinar is a part of a series of webinars organized and co-hosted by the Assessing Sustainability and Effectiveness of Climate Information Services in Africa project, which is part of USAID's Learning Agenda on Climate Services in Sub-Saharan Africa and the Future Climate for Africa program. So we urge you that if you have an interest in the work of either of these programs, please follow the links on your screen and get in touch with us. So as a background, the first webinar in this series, which was held in February this year, highlighted the findings from work exploring African demand for weather and climate services and business models for private sector engagement. The discussions demonstrated a clear interest in understanding how different partnership models can better serve the critical needs of African for timely and reliable climate information services. And today's webinar, the second one, is on understanding capacity needs of national meteorological and hydrological agencies. And it will focus on approaches and tools to identify capacity needs of the national meteorological and hydrological services, focusing on the checklist for climate services, assessment, and the metric tools, and how these tools can be used to integrate climate services gaps and opportunities with national meteorological agencies. Following from this webinar, in late May and early June, we will run the third webinar in this series to identify capacity gaps and recommendations for national and regional training efforts to support sustainable national meteorological and hydrological operations. The presenters will showcase learning generated from several country studies, including Malawi, Niger, and Senegal, on identified capacity gaps and recommended training for national Met agencies. And the fourth, which will be the final webinar in this series, will return to the topic of business models for cost-effective and sustainable CIS delivery by discussing options to sustainably finance national meteorological and hydrological services. Research and analysis shared will examine new funding streams and approaches to fill capacity gaps, such as via public-private partnerships. Case studies from 3 target countries, again, Malawi, Niger, and Senegal, will be discussed, including recommendations for policy reforms. So we are very excited to be hosting a series of webinars with the Sustainable CIS project on this topic at this time, because it appears there's been, over the past few years, an acceleration of intent and actions amongst many global, regional, and national actors to operationalize sustainable services to address the needs of African communities vulnerable to extreme weather and climate events. Given the critical role that national services play in the production and delivery of climate information services, it is important to identify and interrogate the capacity needs of national Met services. So today's webinar will examine a set of tools and their preliminary results to better understand climate service gaps and opportunities with national Met agencies. So I want to go into too much details of the broader context, as we have a distinguished panel that will set the scene and quite a tight schedule for today's seminar. So just a few notes on housekeeping. Our panelists today will do presentations of no more than 8 minutes. We will only be exchanging questions and answers after all presentations have been made. And attendees are requested to submit questions via the Q&A button, below the menu, which should be at the bottom of your Zoom webinar interface. And we kindly request that when you are posting your questions, you indicate the particular panelist to whom your question is directed. And we'll aim to answer as many questions as possible in the allotted time. We have about half an hour for questions and answer session. Any questions not answered live will be answered in writing following the event. So again, I wish to note that the webinar is being recorded and will be shared on Future Climate for Africa YouTube channel. We encourage you to share it with anyone you may know who would like to view it but couldn't attend today's session. So for now, I will provide a brief introduction of our panelists and the topics they will cover. So our first panelist will be Dr. Veronica Grasser, who is a project officer at the World Meteorological Organization's Global Framework for Climate Services. And she will be presenting on a checklist for national meteorological and hydrological services with some reflections on how projects use a tool like this to identify and address needs and capacity gaps. Then our second presenter will be Dr. Tufa Denku, who is a research scientist at the International Research Institute for Climate and Society. He will look into a tool and share his experience on using this tool that enables national Met services to quantify their capacity gaps, building on existing approaches. Our third presenter is Dr. Seydou Traoré, who is an agrometeorologist at the AGRHYMET Regional Centre, and will share his results and experiences from recent national meteorological and hydrological services capacity assessment in 4 countries. Then finally, we'll have Floribert Buguziga, a senior meteorologist, climate services and application from Rwanda Meteorological Agency, who will provide a response on how the assessment and metric tools presented by the above 3 presenters align with their own needs. With that, I will stop sharing my screen and hand over to our first speaker, Dr. Grasser.
Hello, everyone online. I'm Veronica Grasso, and thanks for the introduction, Awiti. This afternoon, I will be talking about the checklist for climate services implementation. I work at the World Meteorological Organization for the Global Framework for Climate Services Office. And I will start. I will first talk about the objectives of the checklist, provide an overview, then look at the gaps and capacity needs which are emerging from the results of the data collected through this checklist, and then we can look at an example, a concrete example from Niger. The checklist is addressed to member countries, so in specific to national meteorological and hydrological services, to self-assess progress with respect to climate services implementation and to identify areas where support is needed. It is WMO corporate tool for assessing capacities of national meteorological and hydrological services with regards to climate services, and is based on the work of the Commission for Climatology, which is composed of hundreds of experts worldwide. The checklist consists of yes and no assessment to the degree to which actions have been taken in these areas, which are listed in this slide, by looking at governance, basic systems, user interface, capacity development, provision and application of climate services, and finally monitoring and evaluation. Within each area, within each of the 6 areas, the actions are listed under 4 types of level of capacity. So for example, here you can see a screenshot of one of the areas, which is user interface. So the questions, the yes and no questions, are divided into levels of capacity going from basic to advanced. So ideally, simultaneous actions will be taken in all 6 categories, moving from left to right, from basic to advanced level. Up to now, we have received a completed checklists from 108 member countries. And looking at the data which is collected so far, the gaps and needs mostly fall into areas number 2 and 6, basic systems and monitoring and evaluation. For example, what comes out is that only 16% of countries which have responded regularly maintain, update, and make available for global access data with regards to essential climate variables and their associated uncertainties. 13% of the countries which have responded to the checklist can document investment plans based on cost-benefit analysis of climate services, and 9% can document policy response as an outcome of climate services. So these are the gaps identified so far through a global analysis, but of course, each country and each region has its own specificities. In terms of the solution, support mechanisms that can offer a solution to address the gaps identified are represented by, for example, providing access to tools, methods, software, and products, promoting twinning approaches between Met services and global and regional centers. In fact, in this slide, you will see on the top left side of the slide, you will see the global producing centers, and on the right-hand side, you will see the map of regional climate centers. And then finally, an additional support mechanism is helping countries to access funds, of course. Climate services require a multidisciplinary approach, multi-institutional collaboration across national institutions and sectors. And so we wanted to show the example of Niger as part of the USAID funded project, Climate Services for Increased Resilience in the Sahel. in which we have implemented some of the solutions which I've described before. For example, through this project in Niger, we have helped the country to establish a national framework for climate services to support development and application of climate services. The national frameworks are institutional mechanisms that help to coordinate, facilitate, and strengthen collaboration among national institutions to allow for co-production, tailoring, and delivery of user sector-tailored climate services. In this graph, you will see the structure of the national framework for climate services of Niger, which is composed of 5 thematic working groups. And I will be talking about the working group on climate and health, for example. So through the twinning approach, which was implemented through this project, in fact, we have promoted double twinning between NOAA, which is the US Met Service, and AGRHYMET, which is the Regional Climate Centre for Africa, to enhance the capacity of AGRHYMET to support its member countries. And then the second twinning approach was applied between AGRHYMET, the Regional Climate Centre, and Niger Met Service. So this twinning really helped to enhance the capacity of both AGRHYMET and Niger to develop and deliver specific products to their to the national users. And through the national framework and the thematic working group, in this case, I will be making the example of the climate and health working group. The Niger Met Service was able to, first of all, engage with the users, find out what they need, and start the process of co-production of specific tailored products. So the result is that the Met Service, together with the health sector, was able to deliver the first bulletin, the first climate and health bulletin in December, and they're producing such bulletin each month. The focus is on meningitis, and it will help health authorities to take prompt and effective decisions based on that, sensitize the population on preventive measures, etc. So thank you very much, and I will be happy to respond to any question. Just to conclude, I wanted to note that the checklist is an institutionalized tool to assess climate services capacities of national meteorological and hydrological services of WMO. It will be regularly updated, and the next presenter will be presenting an assessment tool which is applied within the context of the project, of the Sustainable CIS project, applied to some countries. And I wanted to also conclude with a question on how these data could be complemented, and if the assessment tool that will be presented later on is planning to establish a mechanism to apply the tool more broadly, as now it's currently being applied within the context of the project countries. Thank you very much.
Now I hand over to our next presenter, who is Dr. Tufa. Thank you.
Good morning. I hope everybody can see my presentation. So my name is Tufa Dinku. I am from the International Research Institute for Climate and Society, which is part of Columbia University. So today I am going to share with you our effort to create a matrix that will help national emergency services identify their capacity and capacity gaps. This is my outline. I will provide a little some background about the project, and then try
Tufa,
yes?
Tufa, before you continue, we are unable to see your presentation. Can you please share your screen again with everyone?
Let me try again. Okay. What about now? Can you see that now? Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Oh, okay. Sorry for that. Okay. I will start with the background about the project, and then try to answer the why, the what, and the how of assessing national med services. Try to say why our approach is different, and then share with you our preliminary results, and conclude with some challenge. So as a background, I think Veronica has already mentioned, this is part of USAID-funded project on assessing sustainability and effectiveness of climate information services in Africa. And the objective of this project is developing realistic models and options for sustainable delivery of climate information service in Africa. As sub-objective, we have developing a matrix to assess sustainability and effectiveness of climate information services in Africa, where this presentation and also the presentation from AGRHYMET is deliverable under this sub-objective. So why assess national med services? I think Veronica has already said this. I don't want to spend time on this, but simply to understand and bridge capacity gaps. What do we assess? Because national med services have different aspects of capacity, so we need to assess the different aspects of their capacities, and we need to use a consistent and systematic way of doing that. Fortunately, thanks to the global framework for climate services, where Veronica is located, they have pillars for climate services. These are what the national med services need to have or do to provide full climate services. So 5 different categories of capacities that we can assess national med services against. The next question is, how do we measure progress, or how do we differentiate between med services with different performances? How do I differentiate between a med service in Africa and another one in Europe? Again, for this one, we have a solution from the WMO, the World Meteorological Organization. WMO categorizes med services in 4 different categories, from basic to advanced, based on certain criteria, which you can see on the left side of the screen. So we are going to assess the capacity of the national med services against the pillars, but with progress and using these WMO categories as our milestones. So how do we do the assessment? So we start with the criteria already put forward by WMO for those categories, and then define specific indicators corresponding to those criteria, design questionnaires, and then collect data, and based on that, assess the national med services. And you see at the bottom of the screen, what we have down there is the different pillars. There are 5 different pillars of GFCS. So how is our approach different? Number 1, as I said before, it measures progress with regard to specific capacities, which is the GFCS pillars. So what are specific milestones, which are the WMO MES service categories. We have tried to make it as much as possible, not a self-assessment, but we assess a capacity based on the data collected from national MES services. And again, as much as possible, it's not easy, but as much as possible, we have also tried to make this as quantitative and as objective as possible. So now let me share you our preliminary result. We just started as analyzing the data. So we have what we call a report card for the 7 national MES services we have worked on. Well, we have worked with on this assessment. So the first one I want to share with you is look at how all the 7 national MES services perform with regards to Pillar 1, observation and monitoring. So at the top, you see the 7 national MES services. And on at the row on the left, you will see the different WMO categories. So a green means, yes, that MES service has 5 criteria to be in that specific category. Yellow means almost, but not quite. And red means no, that MES service does not qualify for that specific category. So we can see that only 3 of the 7 MES services actually qualify to be in that category 1, and 1 almost category 2, but not quite category. Next, let's look at all the pillars. Take 1 MES service and look at all the pillars. So we are looking at the national MES service 1. So this MES service satisfies all the criteria for the basic category, and even satisfies Pillar 3, climate information services, for essential category, and almost there for the user interface category. So in terms of the challenge, the first thing is the criteria is not well defined. It's very broad. So it has not been easy to come up with specific indicators. And because of that, coming up with the right questions, number and fit of purpose was not easy. We have tried our best to make it objective, but still there is a lot of subjectivity in the process in determining different threshold and different percentages. And finally, any such assessment is as good as the data you collect. So there were issues of inaccurate and suspicious responses. That's all. Thank you for listening.
So we'll move to the next presenter, who is Damien. Damien is presenting on behalf of Seydou, who is not able to join us. So welcome, Damien.
Okay.
Sorry, Dr. Tufa, you can stop sharing your screen. Okay.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, you can.
Okay. Well, hello to everyone. I'm speaking on behalf of a team of experts from AGRHYMET Regional Centre in Niamey and University of Cape Town. And I'm going to present the results of a survey on capacities of 4 national MES services to provide climate information services. The 4 countries which were investigated were Côte d'Ivoire, Mali and Niger by AGRHYMET, and Malawi by University of Cape Town. We used an open-ended questionnaire. The results were discussed during a validated meeting with the national MES services in each country, and we compared the results between countries. So the key findings related to the staff. You have 2 graphs. The first one shows the proportion of women and technical position for each country compared to the number of full-time equivalent positions. And the second graph shows the distribution of staff by level of study. And the key findings are that women are underrepresented in all national Met services, even if there is a greater proportion of women in Malawi. And if we can find some women at high positions in Mali and Niger. The second finding is that there is a general need to recruit more staff in all national Met services, taking into account future retirements. And there is also a general need to have more staff at PhD level in all national Met services. So regarding now the observing stations and devices, national devices for remote sensing, this graph shows the density of national observation networks. And we can see that there are less than 6 observing stations and less than 6 rainbow Gs per each 10,000 square kilometers in all countries. So one big challenge is to expand the network of observing stations. Another challenge is to develop weather radars network, as it is the case already in Mali, and to develop a pilot lightning detection network as in Malawi. And the third main challenge is to adopt both ENACTS and WIGOS approaches in all the surveyed national Met services. So regarding computing infrastructures, we can see on this graph that there is a significant level of equipment in all countries. But the main challenges are mainly related to electricity and access to internet. There is a need to invest in UPS and backup power generators of sufficient capacity to deal with the electricity outages that are frequent at least 3 months per year in all countries. There is also a need to improve the available internet bandwidth, especially in Malawi, Mali, and Niger. There are some backup copies of climate data that are made in all countries except Malawi, but there is a need for more regular backup copies. And there is also a need to develop capacity to manage regional and global specialized climate database. Regarding now governance, the key findings are that all NMS, all national Met services wish to have more financial resources allocated to technical activities, with a need to generalize analytical finance procedures and allow more flexible management of the budget. There is a need to increase office space in all countries except Mali, and to improve office equipment in Malawi. Regarding research, there is a challenge, which is to fully incorporate research in national Met services mandates, to improve access to online research literature sources, to formalize a system of motivations and incentives for encouraging staff to engage in research, and in general, to develop more research projects and to publish more peer-reviewed papers. Regarding communication, all surveyed national Met services are members of disaster risk reduction committees, and they all contribute to early warning systems. They all use the numerical weather prediction to produce short-term weather forecasts that are disseminated to media every day. They all produce and disseminate seasonal forecasts, usually 2 times per year. But the challenges are to perform quantitative verification of seasonal forecasts, to make effort to provide free access to some weather data for non-state actors, to develop and or use a dedicated website to provide weather forecasts to the public. It's the case only in Malawi at the moment. And to develop the use of mobile platforms and social media, especially in Niger, to disseminate climate and weather information. Regarding users' engagement, all surveyed national Met services are aware of the importance of engaging with users. The challenge is not only to produce monthly weather prediction and national climate atlas, but also to undertake an assessment of users' needs, especially in Côte d'Ivoire and Malawi. And a key challenge is to develop more tailored information products, such as seasonal and local weather forecasts, sowing calendars, which are among the products that are the most often demanded by the public. There is a need to upscale pilot experiences in organizing roving seminars and to develop the use of mobile platforms and social media, well, it was already said in the previous slide. So my last slide summarizes the strengths and the common challenges and needs. So regarding the strengths, there are some experienced staff in all national Met services with a balanced repartition by age. We found some efforts to acquire and develop the network of automatic weather stations. We have seen some pilot efforts to develop radar and lightning detection networks, especially in Mali and Malawi. All national Met services have significant computing infrastructures. They all issue and disseminate weather forecasts and seasonal forecasts. There is an existing staff involvement in research, and all national Met services contribute to early warning system and reduction of disaster risks. Regarding the challenges, the main challenges is that there is a need to increase the staff number, its capacity, and the representation of women. There is also a need to expand the network of observing stations and invest more in remote sensing. There is a need to solve the problem related to electricity outages and access to internet. There is a need to do more regular backup copies of climate data, to make use of information technologies to communicate information to users, to fully integrate the research into national Met services mandates, and to assess users' needs and develop more tailored products. Thank you very much.
To respond to the three presentations in terms of the tools and metrics and how they align with their own needs. So welcome, Floribert.
Good afternoon. I'm Floribert.
Can you share your... Okay, thanks.
Is it shared?
Yes, it is shared.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm Floribert Vogusiga. I'm working for Rwanda Meteorological Agency as a senior meteorologist in charge of climate services. I'm here today to present about the assessment of national meteorological and hydrological agencies, the views, and if I start by background for the participant to know what about Rwanda Meteorology Agency. It is a national services which is under the Ministry of Environment in Rwanda. It started in 1963 as one of the department of the Ministry of Transport and Communication. Until 2011, it was created as an autonomous agency, but its structure was started to be implemented in 2014. This shows that meteorological services in Rwanda is not at all new, but about the functions as an institution, we are still a very young institution.
Floribert, I'm
yes.
sorry to interrupt you, but I'm getting a bit of static noise from your audio. Do you perhaps have a headset that you could use?
Yeah, I tried to use earphones, but there is some function behind. Is it very disturbing?
Yeah, the audio is not very clear though.
Okay. Let me move, huh? Is it clear now?
No, it's the same.
Let me be quick. I think I will not take a lot of time because the environment is not good at all. What about here?
Okay, a colleague is listening from another room. He says it's not too bad. He's able to hear you fine. So you may proceed.
Okay. Yeah, about the vision and the mission of Rwanda Meteorology Agency was to be a meteorological services that is highly efficient and effective customer and employee focused, with the main mission to provide accurate, timely weather and climate services for the general welfare of the population of Rwanda. Within this framework, it was created departments whereby the first department is weather observation and data management, where data services are provided to customers either for research or climate monitoring, project implementation as well. From data observation, weather and climate services and products are developed for dissemination to users, and through a technology and information support services headed by the administration and fund mobilization. In general, we are seen through this component of weather and climate information, where the challenge is to bridge between the producers and the users of this information. Here we have a communication model we use to reach users, especially rural users who don't have really means of access to that information. That's why we try to diversify the model of access of the users to these products. Here you can see a chart whereby all means of communication are used, either in dissemination or the feedback. It is still a very big challenge. That's why we seek for partners, stakeholders to help us to reach people, to give out the timely information and early warning services for planning and decision making. About this webinar, the assessment, we as Meteor Rwanda, as another agency, we found that the assessment was very helpful because it shows clearly where to strengthen, especially for us in capacity development. We need to make efforts because you see our agency is still young. Staff are not well at the same level of knowledge and skills. Information is well demanded, but packaging the information in the way of the requirement of the users at a specific location is still a challenge, so that we need to bridge the effort between producers, researchers, and the users in order to promote the production, the uptake, access, and the use of the weather and climate information. Because, for instance, in Rwanda as well as in Africa, the agriculture is the dominant sector, which is still rain-fed agriculture, so that we need to make effort to make sure that the information which is given, which is disseminated, reach the users and really transform the life and the economies. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm sorry, my presentation was automated in display. Maybe the participants were not able to follow each slide content, but as it will be shared, I thank you for your kind attention. Did you hear me?
Yes, we can, Floribert. Thank you very much for your presentation. Can I hand over to Owiti to take us through the next process of the questions and answers, please?
Thank you. So I'll request the panelists to address 2 to 3 questions directed to them. And I note Dr. Tufa has, quite answered a number of questions, online. So I'll start with Dr. Veronica, if you would wish to, address 2 to 3 questions directed to you. Thank you.
Yes, so one of the questions was how to apply and adopt the experience from Niger, which I presented. And to respond to this question, I wanted to mention that at the Global Framework for Climate Services Office, we have recently published as a World Meteorological Organization publication the guidelines for the establishment of national frameworks for climate services, which is available on our website. And of course, by contacting us through either through myself or through the email, which is on the GFCS website, you can request our support in helping your country to follow the same path as Niger. With regards to the questions, in terms of what are the next steps for the checklist, if these outcomes, if the outcomes of the assessments can be used for decision making to influence financing, etc. We will use, in the context of doublement, we will use the results of these checklist assessments essentially these the analysis of the data collected so far will be used to guide the development of regional plans for addressing those gaps and needs which emerge from the regions based on the analysis of the data collected through the Climate Services checklist.
Thank you. Now we go to Dr. Tufa, and Dr. Tufa, I know you have answered quite a number of questions directed to you, but I have a question for you, because I thought it is interesting to know whether the results provided are based on countries that already established national framework for climate services, or the ones that are not are also included. And again, I wish to know if there is any major disparity between the two categories. And again, finally, in the assessment, did you conduct some field verifications on, or you solely depend on the responses from national Met agencies? Thank you.
Tufa, you need to unmute yourself. We can't hear you at the moment.
Okay, so I was talking to myself for 5 minutes.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. No, so I was saying that kind of question also came from one of the attendees in terms of how the data was collected. So we did collect the data through surveys, but what makes our survey different and also difficult is that for each of those 7 Met services, somebody went to the Met services to ask the questions, number 1. Number 2, we divided our questions into sections, somewhat similar to the pillars, so that it was not only one person answering the question. So different people with different responsibilities in the Met services answered the questions. We did also do some verification. We also plan to do more verifications. For example, using WMO's country profile database, which has already collected a lot of data on the national Met services. We look at their webpage and see if what they say they provide is available or not, that kind of thing. In terms of the national framework for climate services, so we ask, there is a questionnaire saying, have you implemented or are you in the process of implementing? It seems like almost all of the countries said yes, either we have implemented or we are in the process of implementing national framework for climate services. There was also, I think, a question at the beginning from Veronica in terms of how we plan to use this tool forward. How can this be used maybe along with the checklist? So we've been working with GFCS, with WMO all the way while developing this tool. And the wish is, once we go through the process of verification, analysis, and actually refine the tool in collaboration with WMO, our hope is that WMO will be the primary user of this kind of analysis or this kind of tool. But again, we need to work together to refine the tool. The other thing, I mean, the question was, how do we reach the decision makers with this kind of tool? That's the idea. I mean, the first thing is actually to reach decision makers within the national Met service agencies so that they have a look at the assessment, see where their strength is, see where their weakness is, the way Floribert described. Then say, okay, we need help in this area. We need to strengthen this kind of area. And then the Met services can approach their own decision makers and defenders with that kind of request. And I think my belief is this will also make easier for the funding agencies because it shows where they need to focus to strengthen that national Met service. That's what AGRHYMET was actually showing. So I will stop here.
would you like to, address one or two questions, addressed to you?
Please unmute to speak.
Hello, Damien. Hello. It seems we have lost Damien. So, Floribert, could you please go ahead and address some questions, directed to you? Thank you.
Thank you very much. If I'm not mistaken, I got two questions. One from Dominic requesting, asking if how do we want some partners to help us in the climate services delivery. I try to answer by text, but I can say the partners will help us to deliver climate services when they consider it in their planning of activities. Second, when they will try to educate their members of their network that the use of that information is very important, so that if they have any specific query, we sit together, we design together, so that the information they receive can fit in their requirements. The second question was, I don't remember where is it.
Hi,
okay.
Hi.
Yes.
Yeah, just the question was, do users request specific climate models and analysis with specific recommendations?
Yes, of course. That's what I say. Each partner, each user needs some information according to what he does, so that we might be able to respond according to the specific needs at a specific location at a specific time. So that's why we need to design our products according to the user requirements. That's why sometimes from the general information we disseminate, we encourage the users to send their requests of the information according to their needs, so that we can understand how to design such products. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Before we go to the closing remarks by panelists, there's a question here probably for Veronica, Tufa, and Damien on, are the GFCF and the USAID assessment tools publicly available?
Okay, go ahead, Veronica.
Yes, if I can respond from our end, the climate services toolkit, the climate services checklist was distributed to all member countries through the permanent representatives of WMO in the country. We haven't published yet the checklist on the website, but if anyone is interested to access the full checklist for climate services implementation, they can write either to me or through the GFCS website, and we will be happy to to provide access to that.
Thank you. Dr. Tufa, do you want to?
Yeah, so I have already tried to answer that question in the text box. But yes, our tool is the whole project is funded by USAID, so it is public. It should be a public good, and eventually, once we have the final version, it should be available publicly.
Okay, thanks. And I mean, with that, we now come to closing remarks by panelists, where I wish to request the panelists to highlight one final takeaway that they may want to emphasize on, if any, as their concluding remark. And this will be in order of presentation. So, Dr. Veronica, please.
Yes, one final remark from my side is that country actions and investments in general in this field need to be, of course, bottom up. So they need to be based on the real gaps and needs of countries. So these capacity assessment tools are really necessary as a first step before anything else. So that's all from my end. And thanks to everyone who has joined this webinar. We will be happy to respond to any question afterwards. So feel free to get in touch. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Tufa, please.
Okay. So we believe we have made efforts to create somewhat objective approach to assess capabilities of national MES services. And as Seydou's and Damien's and Floribert's presentation showed, the approach can be used to identify the strengths and weaknesses of national MES services, and can be used to make recommendations on some remedies and investment options. But finally, what I would like to stress is that the analysis and hence the recommendations are only as good as the accuracy and honesty of the data we have collected. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Damien. Yes.
We have lost Damien, so maybe on to the next presenter, Oviti.
Floribert, could you give concluding remarks? Thank you.
Thank you, Zabulon. I appreciate, first of all, to be a panelist on this webinar. Second, I appreciate the preliminary results of the assessments, whatever it is. It guides us where to strengthen, where to put efforts, and we know already where we are coming from and where we are heading to. The third message is just for all people to understand the role of weather and climate services in the real life of every day. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So in wrapping this up, I would like to indicate that from our past webinars, we have received comments on the need to have more African voices. We also realize that in many of these discussions, gender-sensitive perspectives are necessary. So I'd like to extend an invitation to today's attendees to get in touch as we are in the process of putting together panelists for the future webinars. And we will be very much this webinar series to be inclusive, rich, and with diverse exchanges. So just a quick reminder on our next webinar, which is the third one on this series, is slated for late May or early June. And it will focus on identifying capacity gaps and recommendations for national and regional training efforts to support sustainable national MET services, operations, and will showcase learning generated from several country studies, including Malawi, Niger, and Senegal, on identified capacity gaps and recommendations for training of national MET services. And in July, the fourth and the final webinar in this series will return to the topic of business models for cost-effective and sustainable CIS delivery by discussing options to sustainable financing of national Met services. Research and analysis shared will examine new funding streams and approaches to fill capacity gaps, such as through public-private partnership. So going back to today's webinar, we will send a follow-up email to all attendees with link to all resources related to this webinar. I saw quite a number of questions, asking whether we are going to share this. So yes, we are going to share it through the FCFA, YouTube channel, and so we also ask that you share these resources with your colleagues who have not, been able to join today. So with that, I wish to bring the webinar to an end. Thank you very much to the panelists and the attendees. Also, thank you very much to our technical team, led by Fatima and Karen, who worked behind the scenes to ensure the success of this webinar. We also wish to request that you complete the poll that is just online right now, so that we can capture your comments to help us improve our future webinars. Thank you.